Well, good morning and welcome to Let Us Reason Together. And today is January 13th, 2026, and we are continuing our stroll slowly through the book of Ephesians. And we are in Ephesians chapter 5, kind of focusing on verses 1 through 7 right now. And I've entitled this series, Walking in Love. We've looked at the plea that Paul gives here. Therefore, be imitators of God as beloved children and walk in love, he says in verses 1 and 2. Then he gives us the pattern to be imitators, just as Christ also loved you and gave himself up for us, an offering and a sacrifice to God as a fragrant aroma. So those were two kind of positive points that Paul makes. Then Paul turns to some negative commands here. And he says here, beginning in verse 3. So I'm going to read verses 3 and 4. We're only going to look at verse 3 this morning, but these are kind of a unit. Paul writes, "But do not let immorality or any impurity or greed even be named among you, as is proper among saints. And there must be no filthiness and silly talk or coarse jesting, which are not fitting, but rather giving of thanks." Listen, whatever God establishes, Satan counterfeits. Where God establishes true love, Satan produces counterfeit love. Counterfeit love characterizes Satan's children, in other words, those who are of the world, just as true love characterizes God's children. We've talked about that. Those who are citizens of heaven. So in contrast to godly, unselfish, forgiving love, the world's love is lustful and self-indulgent. It loves because the object of love is attractive, enjoyable, pleasant, satisfying, appreciative. It loves in return. Produces desired feelings or is likely to repay in some way. It is always based on the other person's fulfilling one's own needs and desires and meeting one's own expectations. Worldly love is always reciprocal, giving little in the expectation of getting a lot in return. And speaking of that kind of love, Jesus said in Matthew 5:46, "But if you love those who love you, what reward have you? Do not even the tax gatherers do the same?" The world claims to want love, and love is advocated and praised from every corner of our culture. Romantic love especially is touted. Songs, novels, movies, television series continually exploit emotional, lustful desire as if that was or were genuine love. Questing for and fantasizing about the perfect love is portrayed as the ultimate human experience. So it should not be surprising that the misguided quest for that kind of love leads inevitably, as Paul says here, to immorality and immaturity, because that kind of love is selfish and destructive. It's a deceptive counterfeit of God's love. It's always conditional and is always self-centered. It's not concerned about commitment, but only about satisfaction. It's not concerned about giving. It's concerned only with what it gets in return. So there's no basis in that kind of love for permanence, because its purpose is to use and to exploit rather than to serve and to help. It lasts until the one being loved no longer satisfies or until he or she disappears for someone else. Now, the word that Paul uses here for immorality is the Greek word porneia, which we get our word pornography from. That Greek term refers to all sexual sin, and sexual sin is against God and against godly love. In Acts chapter 20, 4 verses 24 and 25, Paul is speaking to Governor Felix and his wife Drusilla, and he says, discussing righteousness, self-control, and judgment to come, Felix became frightened and said, go away for the present, and when I find time, I will summon you. You see, what was going on there was Felix had stolen Drusilla from her former husband, and so at that moment, he was living with her in an adulterous relationship. The sexual self-control of which Paul is speaking there pertained to lustful passion, and Felix well understood what he was talking about. The message to the governor was that he was living contrary to God's righteousness by refusing to discipline his sexual desire, and for that, he was subject to God's judgment. Loss of sexual self-control leads to its opposite, which is immorality and impurity. Impurity, the word here is aktharesia, and it's a more general term than porneia, referring to anything that is unclean and filthy. Jesus used the word to describe the rottenness of decaying bodies in Matthew chapter 23, verse 27. The other 10 times that word is used in the New Testament, it is always associated with sexual sin. It refers to immoral thoughts, passions, fantasies, and every other form of sexual corruption. Our culture is consumed with sexuality. And it has even found tragically its way into the church. The influence of the world has been so pervasive, and the church so weak and undiscerning that many Christians have become convinced that all sorts of sexual excesses and impurities are okay. I'm always constantly surprised by the number of people who call themselves Christians who live in adulterous relationships. But it says immorality and impurity cannot be sanctified or modified into anything better than what they are, which is wickedness. It's a crime against the holy God and against the loving Savior. 1 Corinthians 5 verses 1 through 5 and 6, 13 through 20, Paul shows that there is no place for that in the Christian life. And so then he says this, greed is inseparable from impurity. Every form of sexual immorality is an expression of self-will, self-gratification, and self-centeredness, which is greed. It is by nature contrary to love, which is self-giving. Immorality and immaturity but they're both forms of greed in the realm of sexual sin. They are manifestations of covetousness and they express a counterfeit love, which is really hate, because it seeks, since love seeks the purity of others and is unselfish, impurity and immorality is the opposite of that. It masquerades as something beautiful, good, and rewarding. And because those sins seem so attractive and promising, spouses are forsaken, children are neglected and abandoned, homes are destroyed, friends are disregarded, as no effort is spared to fulfill the desire to have the one that you are lusting after. All of that in the name of love. And so because of the strong sexual nature of human beings, sexual sins are powerful and can become perverted in unimaginable ways. If given free rein, sexual sins leads to complete insensitivity to the feelings and welfare of others. It can lead to horrible brutality and frequently to murder. As if you're a fan of true crime, 9 times out of 10, that is an aspect of it. And that is why the sins of immorality, Paul says, of immorality or any impurity or greed should not even be named among Christians, as he says is proper among saints. Those sins cannot in any way be justified, and they should not in any way be tolerated. So the meaning of saints is holy ones, and those who are holy then have nothing to do with that which is unholy. Well, we're going to stop there this morning because there's a lot in these two verses. We'll pick up verse 4 tomorrow. I want to thank you for joining me today. If this has been a blessing to you, hit that like button. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe to our channel. We would very much appreciate that. I pray that you have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow.